Reddit has been arguing about us again. We've got 3 posts coming up today, starting with a relationship-ending stew, a family high drama over an autistic person at their wedding, and an autistic 6-year-old's firm policies about forks. Reddit reached its verdicts on all 3, and I think on at least one of them, everyone answered the wrong question. Anyway, if we haven't met yet, hello, I'm Mike, nice to meet you, a late identified autistic adult, which could quite easily have spent 4 full decades being a character in someone else's Am I the Asshole post. Anyway, before we get there, our AITA stands for Am I the Asshole, or Am I the Arsehole if you're British like me. Today's video is sponsored by Balesa, giveaway details in about 5 minutes, and trust me, everybody wins something. I've been wanting to talk about this one since it went mega viral a few years ago. The title alone, Am I the Arsehole for accidentally ruining my autistic boyfriend's safe food? That line, accidentally ruining, is accidentally telling, but let's read the post in full before jumping to conclusions. My boyfriend loves stew. He wants to eat it every day for every meal. His favourite stew is beef tips and vegetables from a local place, but it's really expensive, like $47 for a big bowl. They don't do small orders for takeout. And he's grossed out by leftovers, so more than half of it gets wasted. We've had a couple of arguments about it. He says, I don't understand his brain. I say, he doesn't understand our budget. $47 per bowl. And leftovers aren't leftovers. I mean, I think we can all agree that leftovers become a completely different food. I find that takeaway or home-cooked pizza is so much better when it's been in the fridge overnight. Chinese food is the same way. It always seems better the next day somehow. But $47 is a lot of money to spend on a single serving of any food. That's about £35 over here, which is about the price of a really nice meal and dessert with drinks. That's special occasion money for a lot of people, and definitely not an everyday thing. If it were every day, 47 times 28 is over 1,300 a month on stew. Whoa, that's a lot. That's like a job's worth of money. Recently, I looked up some recipes, including doing a dissection of the takeout soup, and tried my hand at making a home-cooked replacement for stew night. He loved it for a few days, and then one night he was hanging out with me in the kitchen and saw me put tomato paste into the pot. He was really upset and demanded that I make him the soup without the paste. I told him it wouldn't taste the same, and it would be better because he hates tomatoes. They're not a safe food for him. And this is the moment. It's not the taste. It's the seeing. He's been eating the home-cooked version happily for a few days. It's the same mouth and it's the same stew. But then he watched the paste go in and the food suddenly changed scope without the recipe changing. Now, I'm vegan and I'm not a massive fan of watching raw meat being prepared. It gives me the ick. Mushrooms are another thing. I've never cooked with mushrooms until probably about 4 or 5 years ago. The texture of them, the fungus, right? Like, raw mushrooms make me feel the Last of Us ick. Even though I know in theory poisonous mushrooms, now they're not even dangerous to touch in theory, but I just can't bring myself to do it. It's a psychological ick thing, and I can see how the poster's partner might feel the same way about tomato paste, even though to me, it's just tomato paste, but it might be like a slimy mushroom to him, right? So I made the soup with no tomato paste, and big surprise, something felt off about it to him. Instead of admitting that the tomato paste was necessary, he threw a fit and told me that he didn't want home-cooked food anymore if I was going to play with him and not take his safe food seriously. He thinks I changed more than just the tomato paste in an effort to get him to admit that he was wrong. I'm not sure I like the phrasing of threw a fit there, but I'll get to it. Let's just carry on. $400 in stew orders later, I had an idea to ask the chef when we were picking up the order if there was any tomato products in the stew, and lo and behold, there is tomato in the recipe, fucking tomato paste. In my mind, this was great because I thought he'd get over it if he knew his original perfect stew had tomato paste, like, oh, I guess tomato paste isn't so bad then. But it was the exact opposite. He walked out of the restaurant without saying anything and then refused to eat the stew that night and hasn't ordered it again and has been ignoring me while sulking around the house, using his whiny voice a lot and slamming things. His sister also texted to tell me I'm a selfish asshole for needing to get back at him by taking his favourite food away. Half the work of being autistic is working out what your nervous system actually likes rather than what you've learned to perform. That's true of stew. Conveniently for this next bit, it's not only true of stew. Today's sponsor is Bellessa, who are back with another awesome giveaway offer. They're a bi-woman sexual wellness company with toys for all kinds of sensory preferences. They've sent me 2 of their newest products. You'll remember the Air Vibe, well-engineered and waterproof. I tested that claim in the sea. Well, this is the Air Vibe Pro. It's the same design with the much requested upgrades. 2 zones at once, every setting adjustable from 2 to 5, because of course one person's sensory heaven is still another person's fire alarm, although now it has much stronger vibrations, a longer battery, and the remote control, which is handy if you have mobility issues or a willing partner. And speaking of remotes, the Key Vibe is a wearable one for couples, 5 speeds, and the remote is genuinely indistinguishable from a car key. Do label your keys. And the Blow Pro. The name is doing most of the briefing here. It has multiple speeds and modes, a stretchy fit that adapts to you, and it's splash proof, no judgment, just that high quality engineering again. It's also priced at $69, which I see what you did there. Everyone who enters my giveaway gets something, either a free Vibe or gift card towards one. The link is in the description and pinned comment below. Go ahead and treat yourself. The tomato paste then, it was in there the whole time. Every safe bowl of it had this unsafe ingredient in the base. I literally just wanted to stop spending insane amounts of money on stew. I wasn't trying to hurt him or ruin his life. I'm not autistic. I can't really wrap my head around caring this much about a single ingredient, and I genuinely didn't see this coming. We've been together for 4 years and he's only had 3 other fits like this. The other ones were pretty reasonable. Those were also a little less intense and didn't include input from his family. This is the first time anyone in his family has ever spoken to me like this, so I've been back and forth between you're all overreacting and what have I done? Am I the asshole? It sounds so dumb when I write it all out, but living it has made me feel physically sick with regret. I can't think straight anymore. And there is a little more clarification at the end. ETA. I'm getting ready for work right now, so I can't respond to individual comments, but there's some recurring confusion questions I wanted to clean up. 1. The stew place is a catering place with a mini restaurant, so every time we order takeout, we're ordering a catering amount pretty much. It's not stew made of gold. 2. We order from there 2 to 3 nights a week. It's not the only thing he eats, it's just the top 5 foods for him. He doesn't eat this unreasonably every single day. And 3, he has a job and contributes with money. I'm not funding his entire diet. We do mix money, so even though he pays for the meal half the time, it does still feel like we're losing money. He works part-time and I work full-time. Bills are probably split 70-30. So, no, he's not a kept man with a soup habit. She carries more of the bills because she works full-time and he doesn't. 70-30, her way, if you will. They're paying out of a shared pot, which just so happens to include an expensive safe food. The interesting thing is, about half that comment section decided that he was lying about the stew. He wasn't. Probably. Your brain keeps a ledger like an overly eager accountant. Imagine having a glass of your favourite drink, say a glass of your favourite juice. Then, as an experiment, somebody were to dip in a fully sterilised cockroach. Okay, just for a moment. Now, the cockroach is cleaner than the glass itself. It's basically sterile for this experiment. But it doesn't matter. You've instantly got the ick and you won't want your drink anymore. Probably. I have seen some of you and you know who you are. Psychologists usually call this the contagion effect in what's called disgust psychology. Once it's been in contact with something gross, it's contaminated forever reaction, even when you know that the contact is harmless, like our sterilised cockroach. The psychologist Paul Rozin calls this kind of reaction the law of contagion, which they call sympathetic magical thinking. Once something has been mentally marked as contaminated, that feeling that it's contaminated can persist, even though you know, rationally, that it's safe. It's also why astronauts on the International Space Station will cheerfully tell you that they're drinking yesterday's coffee. Because on the ISS, it's so expensive to get supplies up on board, so water is effectively recycled. It's a timeshare, right? It's humidity, it's sweat, it's moisture on breath, it's even your own urine. It all gets recycled back into drinking water. Even your colleagues' wee yesterday becomes today's cup of tea. Objectively, it's cleaner than most tap water. But your brain will still think about all the astronauts that it passed through before it got to you. The molecules are obviously fine, but the story that our brains attach to it is kind of gross. And in autistic adults, this system can run pretty hot. Food selectivity in adults like us is predicted by two engines at once. We have an insistence on sameness, some of us, and some of us a sensory sensitivity to certain foods. Independently, it was never really about the tomato paste. It was about the predictability contract, right? So he's having the same bowl, he's having it from the same source, it's the same safe. There's research on autistic kids refusing food over nothing more than the brand. 15% versus under 2% of other children, even if it's the same product, the same food, but different packaging. It breaks the predictability contract, so it's different food and feels like maybe a cockroach has been dipped in it. And by the way, this mechanism doesn't need autism or any other diagnosis. It is standard issue human. Just, I hope I've given some thoughts and possible arguments as to why a neurodivergent adult might have an unusually intense reaction to this disgust mechanism. 3 days after she posted, a journalist tweeted about the, quote, guy who's financially abusing his girlfriend to fund his soup habit. And that sentence outran the story. Stew became soup. Couple became, I don't know, crime scene. And the trial was held, and I promise you this is true, in r/soup, a subreddit for soup. Remember her ETA? The dude works, he contributes. A few nights a week they order catering portions to reduce the cost a bit. It's mixed money, 70-30 her way on the bills. It might be financially imprudent to spend this much on preferred foods, but it's not the financial abuse that the headlines seem to want to infer. The headlines just keep coming. Mum's secretly used tomato paste for 20 years, each retelling the boyfriend slightly worse. Girlfriend is slightly more saintly, and this stew slightly more expensive. If any of this feels familiar, and if you're a regular watcher of this channel, you might have noticed the same effect. It's the same machine as many of the bad science debunking stories that I cover. As a story travels, it sheds caveats and nuance, and it gains a villain or two. Except the stereotype this time is the autistic man-child boyfriend. And then, a year later, the update thread. She left, saying, he's not autistic, he has bipolar disorder. He apparently got diagnosed with this in high school and felt ashamed of it because he thinks it's feminine, so his entire family, all caps, decided to start telling people he had autism instead. That's the twist. According to her, he wasn't autistic. He'd been diagnosed with bipolar disorder in high school, then felt ashamed of it because he thought it was feminine, and then his family allegedly started telling people that he was autistic instead. So the internet didn't just misread an autistic man, it may have been arguing about an autistic stereotype posted over an entirely different story. And to be clear, bipolar disorder isn't feminine and it isn't shameful. It is treatable and it can be managed. The shame in this tragedy is the story. As for through a fit, I've previously made a video about meltdowns versus tantrums, linked on screen, and in a nutshell, meltdowns are emotional distress reactions caused by when demands exceed the current capacity to cope. Tantrums are goal-directed. Think a toddler when they don't get the candy that they're demanding. Tantrums tend to stop when the goal arrives. Tantrums are entirely voluntary. Meltdowns are involuntary. Like storms. They stop when they're done. Now, I don't know if the boyfriend is having a meltdown or throwing a tantrum. We have a second-hand story at best, and it's not my place to say. The post describes walking out, days of sulking, whiny voices, slamming things, and that feels like a sustained grievance campaign. It feels like a choice, no matter what the diagnosis turns out to be. And no diagnosis explains freezing out your partner, and no diagnosis should be used as a decoy just because another one feels embarrassing. And this might be the first time I've seen autism being used as a euphemistic diagnosis for something else, well, other than profound autism, but that's another story. A quick credit here, Meg over at I'm Autistic Now What has also covered this story earlier, and I think her video is worth your time and it's linked on screen. Post 2 is a wedding story, which means legally someone's mother has to make it worse. I'm joking, of course. But this one isn't really about flowers, seating plans, or whether the barn has enough fairy lights. It's about what happens when a family treats consent like it's an optional extra. The title sounds awful, but please read all the way to the end. Do not speed read this. Okay. My 22F sister Anna, 21, is special need. She has severe autism, and while she is verbal, most of her communication is physical, like sign language due to her social discomfort. She does speak around family though, and has pretty bad cognitive skills. She can't comprehend boundaries and lives with our parents, so they can best watch her. I'm getting married in 3 months. We planned a simple wedding and reception at my fiancé Michael's parents' barn and farm. Since it's all going to be DIY and we aren't planning anything too expensive, we can do things pretty quickly since flowers, food and decor will be provided by his family. Small barn wedding. Lovely. Nothing bad has ever happened at a small family wedding ever in history. Autism, by the way, doesn't come in severe to mild flavours. There is no severe autism diagnosis. Sure, the DSM-5 has support indicating levels 1 through 3. There are 2 numbers for support levels, one for RRBs and one for social communication, not just one number, and much of the world doesn't even use these numerical indicators anyway. But let's just say she has high support needs, or potentially a co-occurring intellectual disability. We simply don't know. But saying she can't comprehend boundaries, now that's a sentence to watch. Does she truly lack the capacity to learn them, or has the family decided that ordinary neurotypical style explanations, so don't do that, that didn't work, so therefore no explanation ever will? The boundaries can be taught concretely, visually, through sign, and through repetition. Anyway, boundary issues. Let's see what's going on there. I sent out invites last week, and I asked that Anna not come. I told my parents that I understood that would mean that they may not show up, but it was just a heads up. Why no Anna? She has an issue with touching Michael and trying to kiss him. At times, when we were at my parents' house, Anna would try and grab Michael's hands, try to lean in to kiss him, or she'll have really bad shutdowns if she wasn't allowed to be directly next to him. We've tried speaking to her, but there's only so much we can do when she doesn't really understand. I told my parents I just want one day for Michael to be my partner and not Anna's comfort person. They called me selfish and asked how I expected them to agree to something like this. They told me Anna is disabled and may never experience a wedding of her own, and while I have Michael for probably the rest of our lives, she'll have no one, and that Michael and I can be a little more understanding to the reality of her life. I feel like a total ass, and what they're saying to me has really gotten to me, and I'm starting to question my decision. Am I the asshole? Comfort person makes Michael sound a bit less like a person and a bit more like an accommodation. A human weighted blanket that Anna can be placed next to stay regulated. Her attachment to him may be completely real, by the way. She may have a need for familiarity and touch. You know what I'm going to say, right? Michael is a grown man with a body and boundaries of his own, and he's about to marry her sister. Anna isn't a villain for seeking the kind of comfort that she's been allowed to seek. My question is why the adults around her taught her that access to another person could be guaranteed in the first place. My parents called me letting me know that they won't be coming and that it's best I don't bring Michael around anymore since I've chosen some man over my sister. They've told me that Anna wanting to kiss Michael and hug him is normal for a woman her age and that she doesn't understand what her feelings mean. I suggested that they try to redirect her during the wedding, but they said Michael's going to be family to her and he needs to get over it. I suggested that they watch the wedding via web and they said that's not fair and they deserve to see things in person. I asked if I could pay for someone with proper credentials to watch her that day. And they asked me what I would do when they died, if I'd pawn her off every time. I dropped the unfortunate truth bomb that I don't want to put any more of my life aside for Anna anymore. I did up until I turned 18, and that Anna's not my life's responsibility, and that I won't be her keeper. I assured them I'd pay for her care, but if she's okay doing this to Michael, then I worry for if I ever do choose to have children and what she'd do with them. They said I was sick for suggesting that she'd do anything to my future children and hung up on me. They sent a lengthy text telling me not to contact them until I could do the right thing. So that's where we are now. Well, that escalated quickly. The poster offered a live stream, qualified support at the venue, even paying for that support herself. She's searching for every way that Anna could be included that doesn't require Michael to accept unwanted touch. Her parents are rejecting every one of them because their version of inclusion has only one acceptable outcome, that Anna attends and that Michael is physically available for her, while the bride is responsible for managing whatever consequences happen. If you remember my previous video on transactional analysis, the ones with the parent, adult and child ego states, it seems that the bride is offering adult solutions which get rejected every time. She offers one adult solution after another and everyone is rejected. So, how about a live stream? No, not fair. Okay, how about qualified support? No, not fair. I will pay for it. Still not enough. And that's because the parents aren't looking for an alternative. They are looking for one particular answer that everyone carries on as before. This is reminiscent of the yes but game in transactional analysis, where the other party rejects every adult suggestion until exploding, which is exactly what they've done here by saying, what will you do when we die? The ultimatum, the payoff, there it is. The argument was never only about an invitation to a wedding. Her parents expect Anna's sister, the bride here, to inherit their caregiving role. And when she says that she'll help pay for Anna's care but won't become her keeper, they call that choosing some man over her sister. Michael isn't just some man, he's the person that she's marrying, and refusing an assigned lifetime of care is not the same as entirely abandoning Anna. Unfortunately, parts of Reddit did what Reddit does sometimes and moved the blame from the parents onto the disabled person. And the bride had to come back to stop them. This is not an excuse to talk badly about disabled people, nor is this an opportunity to air out your hatred for them. My sister is not a scapegoat to hate disabled people. She is a human being with feelings. She's not a statistic. She is not evil. Please stop treating my sister as if she's a malicious monster. This debacle is between me and my parents. Leave her out of it, please. I'm begging you. I don't want to hear why you think my sister sucks. I'm really glad she wrote that. She's drawing a firm boundary around Michael, her wedding and her future, but she refuses to allow Reddit to turn Anna into a monster. Reddit's overall verdict, by the way, was NTA or not the asshole. Consent is consent. Disability does not make another person's body communal property. But who's the arsehole still isn't the most interesting question. The more troubling one for me is how a 21-year-old reaches this point while adults around her describe boundaries as something that she can't understand, and at the same time tell Michael that he needs to get over having his crossed constantly. We can't know from a second-hand Reddit post exactly what Anna has been taught, what she understands, or what support might work for her. But teaching a boundary once verbally is not the same thing as making a boundary accessible. Boundaries need to be concrete, perhaps visual, sometimes signed or rehearsed, and reinforced consistently. I have a video on boundaries linked below if this is something that you're struggling with. But if Anna cannot reliably maintain this in a highly charged setting, then the adults need a support plan that protects both her and the people around her. Just saying Michael will tolerate it is not a support plan. Little warning here, content warning before the next part. I am about to mention some rates of sexual victimization. Nothing graphic, but if today isn't the day for that for you, skip forward about 2 minutes. This failure to provide accessible relationships and good consent education is so much bigger than just this one family. In a 2014 study, autistic adults are less likely, depending on the topic, to report learning about sex from parents, teachers, or peers. They also had lower measured sexual knowledge. And 78% of the autistic group reported at least one experience of sexual victimization, compared to 47% of the comparison group. Lower actual knowledge statistically explained part of that difference. That does not prove that education alone would have prevented these negative, harmful experiences, but it does dismantle the idea that withholding quality information about sex, about relationships, about consent and boundaries keeps people safe. Autistic people especially. Ignorance is not innocence. It is literally vulnerability. Part of the problem is that autism is still culturally presented as childhood. In one review of Autism Society of America chapter websites, only about 5% of photographs depicting autistic people showed adults. This was back in 2011. 8 years later, that had risen to 20%. Better, but children still dominate. You cannot prepare for adult relationships while collectively pretending that autistic adulthood barely exists. Touch is really complicated too. Autistic people cannot be divided into two neat piles of hates touch and seeks touch. The same sensory profile can include avoidance and seeking, and preferences can change with the person, the body part, the context, and wherever the touch is, and whether the touch is predictable. Anna may genuinely find proximity or touch with Michael comforting. We cannot know that from the post. What we do know is that comfort then doesn't grant permanent access to someone else's body. That just because you need an accommodation that costs someone something doesn't mean you're entitled to it. The family had two responsibilities: teach consent in a form that Anna could access, and create support for situations where those boundaries might not hold. Instead, they just sort of abdicated that entirely. Seemed to make Michael the support plan. I posted a video last year going into more detail of that sort of thing, and it is linked below. Before we move from wedding politics to fork diplomacy, a quick practical pause. I'm going to suggest a few tips here. None of these are magical fixes, but might have lowered the temperature in each of today's stories. Describe the mechanism before assigning motive. This is a variation of the assume misunderstanding and not malice. Unexpected changes to familiar food genuinely distresses me. And saying that to someone gives you somewhere to go. Saying you ruined it usually just starts an argument. Number 2, if you're recreating a safe food, change one variable at a time and say what you're changing. Predictability might be part of what makes the food safe and not ick in the first place. Warn people about changes whenever you can. Advance notice won't remove every difficult reaction, but surprise tends to make negotiation much harder. Agree on the exit plan before an event. Leaving early isn't necessarily a failed outing. Sometimes accommodating yourself in advance is the trick that allows you to participate at all, even if you don't need the accommodations in the end. I made a video about going to my first club night as an adult. I had a great time, and without using any of my accommodating tactics, but it wouldn't have been possible for me to go at all without having had them. So that's linked in the description if that interests you. Which brings us to the family. They had a plan. This family had a plan. Unfortunately, that plan required everybody else's forks. This is from August 2020, which is vintage in internet terms. I'll keep it short. Friend has an autistic son. I've met him before, lovely lad. He's 6. I've never spent prolonged time with him, just short hour visits to my home or at the park. They invited me to dinner the other night and I went. Now, before anyone starts, I had rituals at 6, I have rituals at 44. The tea gets made in the correct order at correct times, although that might just be the British half of me speaking. Their son has a ritual he has to do at dinner where he takes a bite of his food, then exchanges his fork with someone else. Their whole family follows this routine. He takes a bite, swaps fork with mum, takes a bit, swaps fork with dad, and so on, all around the table. They allege it's the only way he'll eat. That is actually an impressively elaborate piece of fork choreography. The ritual may be genuinely important to the child. It might make dinner feel predictable for him. It might help regulate him. It might help him to continue eating. Speaking as a parent, I can see how this ritual might have developed. We had similar rituals when my son was about the same age. Not sharing forks though, but especially as parents, right? You develop these harmless sorts of games as a family unit, especially to kind of encourage a child to eat when maybe they otherwise would refuse their food. It might be broccoli, but not putting a stranger's used fork in your mouth is completely a reasonable boundary to have. Oh, well, I refused. Okay, I see where this is going. And it resulted in a huge tantrum, which unfortunately resulted in thrown plates and other dinnerware. Some of it is broken. I'm being blamed for not doing this, let's be honest, disgusting ritual. Even if it's the only way he'll eat, they should have warned me beforehand and I would have politely declined the invitation. Was I the asshole? Reddit says no, not the asshole. And on the actual question, I agree. The guest didn't agree to exchange used cutlery, and the parents should absolutely have warned them before dinner. They could always have maintained 2 forks or maybe a supply of clean forks to play the game with so that they'd always have a clean fork to hand. I'm much less comfortable confidently calling the child's reaction a tantrum though. Plates were thrown and the situation became unsafe. That does matter, but as with all Am I the Asshole posts, this is a second-hand paragraph about a 6-year-old that we've never met. We can't tell if it was a meltdown, panic, frustration, learned behaviour, or several things arriving simultaneously with a side order of flying peas. The comments split into 2 very confident camps, as the internet does want to do sometimes. Camp 1 says, just swap the fork. Accommodating him costs you nothing. If you remember the whole cockroach juice bit from the first post, yeah, it does cost you something. Ick, even if it is sanitary. It costs you bodily autonomy. Camp 2 says, never give in, accommodating rituals only makes them stronger, and that claim needs examining closely too. Insistence on sameness in autistic children has been closely associated with anxiety. Longitudinal research following children from preschool to age 11 found that intense sameness behaviours could precede elevated anxiety later on, even though the relationship changed with age and wasn't a simple one-way cause. In other words, the ritual may not be the source of the distress, it may just be the child's current way of managing it. The warning about reinforcing rituals does come largely from OCD treatment. In OCD, family accommodation, joining compulsions, providing repeated reassurance, changing family routines around them can help keep the cycle going, and reducing that accommodation is often part of the treatment. But we can't simply copy and paste that rule from OCD onto autism. OCD compulsions are often driven by intrusive thoughts and experienced as unwanted. Autistic routines may instead feel pleasurable, organising, or regulating. There is overlap, of course, and autistic people can also have OCD. The point is, the two behaviours can look identical from the outside, but be doing completely different jobs on the inside. Now, I can't say that accommodating this fork ritual will make it stronger, and I can't say that continuing it forever is a harmless thing to do. The honest answer is we don't know enough about the child and the family, and the autism-specific evidence doesn't justify the certainty forming on either side of that comment section. How's that for black and white thinking? What we do see is a design problem. The child's current coping strategy depends on everyone at the table buying in and participating, even guests who never agreed to it. That's what makes this particular ritual or accommodation, or whatever you want to call it, completely fragile. One unexpected no, and the whole thing collapses. The kinder thing to do, long term, has to be to preserve whatever the ritual provides while gradually shifting it towards something that the child controls themselves. Perhaps swapping between their own forks, or exchanging tokens instead of cutlery, or some other predictable sequence developed with the child and appropriate support. Not ABA. And I'm not suggesting a treatment plan. I'm just throwing some examples out there. Maybe someone will find one useful. So, after all that, I'm not sure Reddit's verdicts are actually the useful bit. The stew story eventually turned out not to be an autism story at all, or at least not in the way everyone assumed. But the food reaction still makes sense. It does to me. You don't need to be autistic for disgust and predictability to get tangled together until something you happily ate yesterday becomes completely impossible today. The days of sulking and slamming things, that's a completely separate issue. At the wedding, Anna may genuinely find Michael comforting. I don't think she's plotting to steal her sister's fiancé away, but somewhere along the way, the adults around her turned Michael helps Anna feel safe into Michael must always be available to Anna. And those are two completely different arrangements, especially if nobody remembered to ask Michael what he thinks. And then there's the 6-year-old with the forks. He found a strange little system that helped him to eat, and his family joined in, and it became normal inside that house, and probably worked perfectly well right up until somebody from outside the system sits down and reasonably says, "No, I don't want your dirty fork in my mouth," and the parents hadn't planned on that. And the whole thing explodes into flying peas and flying plates. I think that's the thread about all three, right? Someone finds a way to cope, and the people around them build a routine out of it, and eventually that routine collides with someone else's needs and boundaries of their own, and the story just becomes an Am I the Asshole post overnight. And for the love of God, give the child a second set of forks. If 3 Reddit disasters weren't enough, there is a 4th one on Patreon about a 14-year-old at family dinner again, but a pair of noise-cancelling AirPods that somehow becomes a question of respect. And that's over there for the Autistic Cats, along with the scratching post, the Discord, and all the extra bits. Before you disappear, the Balesa giveaway is linked in the description and the pinned comment. Everyone who enters gets either a free toy or a gift card towards one. Everybody wins something, so go on and treat yourself. And if the wedding story left you thinking about consent, boundaries, and autistic relationships, my full sex and relationships video is on screen now. Stim the subscribe button on your way past, and the cats and I will see you in the next one. Take care.